Imagine a world where the maps are all finished, where every mountain peak has been measured and every valley has been named. We live in an age of total surveillance, where satellites peer into every corner of our planet, leaving no room for shadows. But deep in the high, frozen silences of the Himalayas, a whisper persists that defies our modern sense of absolute certainty. It is the legend of the Yeti, a creature that exists at the precise intersection of biological possibility and cultural myth. For centuries, the people of Tibet and Nepal have spoken of the Mete, a wild man dwelling in the unlivable zones. To the locals, this is not a campfire ghost story, but a grounded reality of the high-altitude ecosystem they call home. The mystery crossed into the Western consciousness in 1921 when explorer Charles Howard Bury discovered massive, human-like footprints at 20,000 feet. These tracks were not made by boots, but by bare feet, pressing deeply into the pristine, oxygen-thin crust of the world. Then came the 1951 Everest expedition, where Eric Shipton photographed a footprint so clear it seemed to stare back at science. The image ignited a global obsession, transforming a regional folklore into a sophisticated, planet-wide hunt for a missing branch of evolution. Why are we so desperate to find a giant, hairy primate hiding in the most inhospitable terrain on the entire Earth? Perhaps it is because the Yeti represents the last great, maybe in a world that feels increasingly small and fully explained. If such a massive creature can remain hidden, then the wilderness is still wild, and nature still holds secrets from us. Over the decades, physical evidence began to emerge. Strange tufts of coarse hair, ancient scalps kept in monasteries, and sun-bleached bones. These relics were treated as holy icons by some and as the smoking gun of cryptozoology by hopeful researchers and explorers. In the 1950s, wealthy adventurers like Tom Slick funded massive expeditions, scouring the vertical labyrinths of the Himalayas with dedicated intensity. Even the legendary Sir Edmund Hillary, the first man to stand atop Everest, found himself drawn into the search for the beast. He led the 1960 Silver Hut expedition, bringing high-tech equipment to analyze the biological traces found in the high-altitude caves. This was the moment when folklore met the laboratory, setting the stage for a collision between romantic mystery and cold data. As we look closer at the evidence, we must ask, are we hunting a physical animal or a shadow of our own past? To solve the riddle of the Yeti, we must first look at the biology of the giants that once walked among us. Evolution is a master of scale, and millions of years ago it produced a primate of staggering proportions, Gigantopithecus blacki. Standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing over half a ton, this real-life king of the apes once roamed the forests of Asia. We know this because of dragon bones fossilized teeth found in traditional Chinese apothecaries that turned out to be prehistoric primate molars. Mainstream science suggests Gigantopithecus went extinct roughly 300,000 years ago, likely due to a changing climate and the disappearance of its food. But cryptozoologists ask a tantalizing question. Could a small reclusive population have survived by retreating into the inaccessible Himalayan heights? It is a romantic idea, but biology is a game of numbers, and large mammals require massive amounts of calories to survive. The death zone above 8,000 meters is a biological desert, where even the hardiest mosses struggle to find a foothold. For a breeding population of giants to exist, they would need a stable food source and enough individuals to avoid the trap of inbreeding. In 2017, the most comprehensive genetic study to date was conducted by biologist Charlotte Lindquist and her international team of researchers. They analyzed 9 Yeti samples, hair, skin, and feces collected from various Himalayan sites and private collections over several decades. Using advanced DNA sequencing, they compared these mystery samples against the genetic library of every known living mammal on Earth. The results were definitive, yet perhaps even more fascinating than the myth itself. 8 of the 9 samples belonged to bears. Specifically, they were the DNA signatures of the Himalayan brown bear and the Tibetan blue bear, 2 of the rarest predators on the planet. These bears are masters of the high-altitude terrain, capable of standing on their hind legs and leaving tracks that look eerily human. When a bear's rear paw overlaps its front paw in the melting snow, the resulting shape creates the giant footprint that sparked the legend. The ninth sample? It turned out to be from a dog, likely a stray that had wandered into a high-altitude camp. For many, this was the end of the mystery, a cold bucket of water thrown onto a century of adventurous dreaming. Science had spoken. The abominable snowman was not a lost cousin of humanity, but a misidentified bear in a white wilderness. And yet, if we look closer at the bear DNA, we find a hidden chapter of history that keeps the wonder alive. While the DNA points to bears, it also reveals that these animals are evolutionary ghosts, survivors of a lineage we barely understand. The Himalayan brown bear diverged from its relatives during a period of massive glaciation, becoming a specialist of the high-altitude void. This suggests that while the monster may be a misinterpretation, the mystery of how life survives in such extremes is very real. We must ask ourselves why the human mind is so fertile at planting giants in the empty spaces of our maps. Psychologically, we are a species that evolved in a world of predators, where every rustle in the grass demanded our full attention. Our brains are hardwired for pareidolia, the tendency to see faces in meaningful shapes where none actually exist, especially in the dark. To a lonely climber, oxygen deprived and exhausted, a shifting shadow on a glacier becomes a guardian, a god, or a monster. The Yeti is a manifestation of our deep-seated fear of being truly alone in a vast, uncaring, and mechanical universe. By populating the mountains with wild men, we make the wilderness feel a little more human, a little less alien to us. But there is also a biological warning in the legend. We are living through a period of rapid, man-made environmental collapse. The very bears that provided the DNA for the Yeti are now critically endangered, pushed to the brink by hunting and habitat loss. If the Tibetan blue bear vanishes, the Yeti dies with it, leaving the mountains truly empty for the first time in history. We spend millions searching for a legendary primate, while the actual breathing miracles of the Himalayas are quietly slipping away from existence. Perhaps the most profound truth is that we don't need a hidden species to make our planet feel magical or mysterious. The fact that a bear can survive the sub-zero screams of a Himalayan blizzard is a story every bit as incredible as a myth. Science does not destroy the wonder of the world. It simply replaces a vague daydream with a more complex and beautiful reality. As our satellites map the final inches of the globe, the shadows are disappearing, but our curiosity remains as sharp as ever. We may never find a giant ape in the snow, but we will always find something new if we keep looking with honest eyes. So we return to the big question: is there still room for the unknown in a world where everything is measured? In the end, the Yeti might not be a creature of flesh and bone, but the part of us that refuses to stop wondering.